Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Borovkin. Today, my dear friends and subscribers, I'd like to discuss truly historical events that are unfolding, and that is the 28-point plan for peace in Ukraine, or the Trump plan. And the title I'd like to intrigue you to suggest today is Putin and Trump versus Zelensky and the European Union. Simply because, as you shall see, I will argue that the reception of this plan is going to encounter serious opposition in Ukraine and in the European Union. But let me start from the very beginning. The details of the plan were not known, and there was a lot of speculation in world media as to what is going on and what the plan is. And today, I found on the website of Strana UA, which is a Ukraine opposition website, a 28-point plan and the text of it in Ukrainian, and that is what I'd like to discuss. They say the source of it is the United States Embassy in Kiev, but the text of it does sound to be in accordance to what we've heard before, and with the comments that have been coming from Europe and American sources. So let me first discuss the plan itself and the 28 points, and then the most importantly is the reaction to the plan in the United States, in Europe, in Russia, and most importantly in Ukraine itself. First, let me say a little bit about the history of the plan, because that is important. Because since the meeting of President Trump and President Putin in Alaska, there has been some kind of uncertainty. What did they talk about? What did they agree? And now, in the context of this plan, everything seems to take shape. Everything becomes to be clear, because the words of Putin at the time that the root causes of the conflict have to be addressed. When we look at the 28-point plan, you could see that there is a relation between the root causes, the way the Russians define them, and the way they are indeed addressed in the 28-point plan. So it seems to me that the history of this plan is in Alaska, where Putin and Trump had agreed on major principles or guidelines. Nothing was done in terms of the text, but there was an agreement and an understanding to develop the plan. And ever since then, there were ups and downs and turns around, and things didn't look good that something may come out, but the work had continued, as Foreign Minister Lavrov has explained in his recent interview to Corriere della Sera, Italian newspaper, where he indeed confirmed that work has been going on between the Russians and the Americans to address the root causes and prepare the plan. And finally, in mid-October, Dmitriev, Russian representative in the negotiations, did come to Washington and spent there quite some time unnoticed by world media. And it seems to me that this is what he worked on, and that is worked with Witkoff on the text of the plan. So it seems to me there is a serious Russian participation in it. Then there was a Budapest meeting announced, and it was torpedoed. Nothing happened. There was resistance in EU, resistance from UK, resistance from Zelensky, and it looked like the plan was torpedoed. But work continued, and finally what we have is the plan that everybody now has to deal with. It is a reality. So now a few points about the plan itself. I have no time in this video to discuss at length every one of those 28 points, and each of those points have sub-points, and they address issues in very, very detailed and thorough way. Indeed, that's a document that is almost ready to be signed as clauses of a possible treaty. But in very brief terms, let me address what it says. The territorial issue. Russia gets Donbass, that is to say Donetsk and Lugansk provinces, and Crimea, and they will be recognized as sovereign Russian territory. However, Ukraine does not have to recognize them, and therefore that doesn't require any action on the side of Ukraine. Just acknowledge that Russia controls it. Now, as to Zaporozhye and Kherson provinces, the proposal is to freeze the borderline, the future border along the current front line, dividing de facto the provinces as they are. Now, that's the territorial. Now, there are several important issues of political arrangement. And the most important one is that it does address not only the issue of a Russia-Ukraine conflict or war, but it also addresses the issue of international world order after the Ukraine war. And that is long-lasting. That has historical implications. So, the most important, of course, is Russian demand of no NATO expansion is accepted. It is part of the plan. There is no expansion further, and that is written in the declaration of NATO itself. The next point that Russians have been demanding is neutral status for Ukraine. That is also in the plan, and it is accepted. Ukraine may join European Union, and the plan, has all kinds of clauses about what it would be and their preferential status, etc., etc. But the stumbling block here is that any European country may object to EU's membership of Ukraine, and therefore that is not something in the competency of this plan or this treaty, if it may be, because that's EU to decide whether they accept Ukraine or not. There are important provisos there about how the 300 billion Russian assets will be used. They will be unfrozen. They would be divided into investment fund for Ukraine. They would be divided into joint U.S.-American plan of investment. The guarantees, security guarantees, are provided by the United States and by Russia, and there are penalties for violating of those. There's a committee to be set up, presided by Trump, as it is the case in the possible peace settlement in Gaza. So all of these things sound quite serious and could be elaborated into serious clauses in the future security arrangements. What's interesting is that the European Union is only mentioned as something that Ukraine can join, but is not a party to the plan. The plan is to be signed by the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. There's no proviso of the EU signature. Now, also in terms of political and cultural clauses that the Russians have been adamant about is that the rights of Russian minorities in Ukraine are respected, that the Russian language is recognized as official language of this country, as it was in the 1991 constitution, that the Russian Orthodox Church and its rights and properties are restored, something that had been a very serious demand of the Russian side, that there's also clauses of reunification of families and reunification and return of children and prisoners of war and hostages and amnesty for all the participants, and the clause of no claims or military trials of war crimes. All of that is going to be stopped and no further action required. In other words, the overall plan seems to be serious consideration on all and each issues, but if you read it attentively, there could be serious objections or interpretations or definitions to each of those clauses that may indeed be the most difficult part to overcome. Now, let me just say that the plan obviously seems like a Putin Trump plan or Trump-Putin plan. It seems to me that the core of it is the agreement of the two presidents. And therefore, there is a crucial importance is how this plan is to be treated by the Europeans and by Ukraine. Now, let me just say a word about Russian reaction. The Russians are not likely to object to it, except one issue, and that is the Zaporozhye and Kherson provinces. These provinces are a part of the Russian Federation by constitution, and Putin may encounter difficulties convincing the Duma and other opposition, the army, that that is something that would be frozen on the current front line. Nevertheless, I still think he will be able to do it. I also think that the United States president will be able to overcome opposition in the Senate and in the Congress for this peace plan, although it would be an uphill battle because people like Kellogg and Senator Graham and others in the Democratic Party will be against it, and it would be an uphill battle. But it seems to me that the desire for peace may indeed prevail, but it's not guaranteed. The most serious opposition, of course, as I've just discussed, is coming from the EU and from Ukraine. Let me address first the EU. EU and UK have been all against it, and they are likely to double their effort to be against it simply because they're not included. The Kaja Kallas, the spokesperson for European Union, has dismissed the plan, called Russia an aggressor, denied the possibility of rewarding aggression, as they put it. President Macron is negative about it. Von der Leyen is negative. All the usual suspects are against it. And of course, the United Kingdom is adamantly against any such plan. Now, what all these people want is to continue the war. And they want to continue the war for their personal reasons, for the reasons of their understanding of the conflict, for the needs of their domestic constituencies, for the profits that they're seeking of their defense industries. But their reasoning is like this, that Europe is stronger than Russia. Europe GDP is way bigger than Russia. Europe's defense industries are way bigger than Russia. If there is a combined effort, Ukraine can be armed, and this is what they keep saying. They can be armed, Ukrainians, and they can win in a sense of not making it possible for Russia to gain its objectives. So they're absolutely serious about torpedoing this plan and to continue the fight. And their candidate, and as I mentioned in my previous video, is General Zaluzhny in London. It seems to me their plan is to put him in power and to continue the war. Okay. Now the most serious, and that is the situation in Ukraine and the reaction of Zelensky. Now, Zelensky, predictably, as he has been doing throughout 2025, is going to say, praise Trump for his paymaking, and he's going to praise Americans and blah, blah, blah. But he is going to do the same thing he did before, and that is accept the plan, add a few clauses that would make it totally unacceptable to Russia, and then accuse the Russians of sabotaging and rejecting the plan. That is what he's going to do. But this time around, Trump is ready for it. And this is what I suggested in my previous video. I think that the Trump people have been using the corruption scandal to put pressure on Zelensky to sign the deal. If he does not, then it seems to me there are some other tools in the chest box, and that is to continue the corruption probe, to include people who are who actually could have documents on Zelensky himself and the theft of U.S. equipment and money and supplies. And in that case, the pressure could be almost to a point of arresting Zelensky and charging him with corruption and waste and theft, and replacing him. Now about the possibility of replacing. What is different this time around is the political crisis in Ukraine itself, and that is a rebellion in the parliament, in the Rada, and specifically in Zelensky's own political party, the Servants of the People. He has only 5% majority, and there's serious talk that Arahamia, the chair of this party faction in the Rada, is openly calling for dismissal of Zelensky. Now, what is possible is that by Ukrainian constitution, Zelensky's term is over, and it is the chair of the Rada who could be proclaimed legitimately, constitutionally, as the acting president of Ukraine pending new elections. In other words, the legal overthrow of Zelensky is possible, and it seems to be that the people who are behind all these revelations, people like former President Poroshenko and Prime Minister Tymoshenko and some of the armed forces could well be all ganging up on to remove Zelensky. And in that case, I would not rule out that these people may indeed support the plan, not because they want it or like it, but because they want power, and because they may have made a deal with President Trump that they keep a big chunk of Ukraine and American support, and they may go for it. However, what is not possible to predict is the reaction of the nationalist forces who have been in power in Ukraine since 2014. They have incorporated Poroshenko when he originally was for cooperation with Russia. They have incorporated Zelensky, who at the beginning of this term was for cooperation with Russia. These people are very powerful, and they may not accept simply that this plan goes through. In other words, there are serious forces in Ukraine who would be against any cooperation with Russia, any deal with Russia, and especially the terms that it suggests: no NATO, Russian language, Orthodox Church, totally unacceptable to this segment of nationalists in Ukraine. So that's where we are, and we will see how development would go. But it seems to me that if Zelensky is overthrown, or if nationalists put up resistance to the plan, and or Zaluzhny is appointed president, all bets are off. There could be a revolution in Ukraine, there could be total instability, there could be unpredictable consequences. So that's where we are, my dear friends. I will see you soon with another edition of Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Please subscribe to my channel. Please read my latest book, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin, and I will see you shortly. Bye-bye.